So what are the options for families, for example, who may have a full guardianship for somebody, okay, like we do for my son, and when we pass away, we have no family members. So state guardianship, you would think would be the next thing. Are there other options?
So you have other family members?
No. Is there other options like paid type of guardianship or?
Well, I think there's Guardia Care, or is it called Elder Care now? If someone can chime in, I think there's a group out of Louisville that provides those services, and there are provisions that allows private organizations for a small fee. I think it's like 6% of their income to yes. You want to clarify?
Well, Karen, I would say to you, I'm a power of attorney for a woman who had limited guardianship and expired. There is no family, so you look at the people in the person's life. So it goes back to who are the people in the person's life, and it may have been previously a paid person, but then you ask them. And so when looking at your son, are there the possibility of other people in your life? But to me, the first line of defense would be to try to find someone.
No, and actually, Carolyn, what I was going to say, after answering that one specific, is it goes back to supported decision making.
So there are people in the person's life that
right.
might really be willing to take on that role again, because things are very much in place for your sons.
So Laura,
they have services. But still, they do have the SCO waiver. You do have a supplemental needs trust. You probably have ABLE accounts. So it's not as though there's not an off, and you really do have everything in place, and so it's not to minimize that there's still a role, but the woman that I do this for is in Louisville, I'm in Lexington, and the person who would succeed me is in Louisville, which is better, but all that to say is that I think the best strategy is to try to find an individual person, and you have a pretty wide sphere of influence, I'm guessing.
Yeah,
that's
pointing out an advantage of supported decision making that we didn't really talk about, and that some people use it in that way, is to get this team around the person so that it's not on just one person or two people, but they have this team in place that if something happens to one of those people, the others can come in and
the other example I would share is that having an advisory committee to your supplemental needs trust. So that's where for a woman, I agreed. Jane Hart, some of y'all knew Jane Hart. So I helped her get all of her state stuff in place, and there's an advisory group, and there were 5 of us that she asked to be on it. Jane and Ken have been dead a long time. The Guardian developed Alzheimer's, and so again, there were 5 of us. So one of us, thank God, it was the right person. She would stepped into that role. So just know that I think that's another possibility. I don't know if you have an advisory committee to your trust. A lot of attorneys do that, but now there's 4 of us because one of them has passed, but something happened to this person, they're still the youngest person, and there's still somebody like 20 years younger, frankly.
And there's probably some people you can add because,
there probably are some people we could add now, exactly. But she has the SCO waiver. So all I just say is that's just another strategy. If they're for parents to form an advisory committee in their supplemental needs trust, because those people clearly could likely take on that role.
And then those people have experience with knowing.
They know the person, they know, and all the people she did ask had some experience kind of in the human service realm. So, and then there is a corporate trustee for that person. That's just another strategy.
Yeah, because if you do, the state is the last resort in those situations, but then you're going to get someone who doesn't know your sons and has, like we've seen, 80 other people. So not to scare you, but just to say,
Scare me. I was asking the question for 2 reasons.
Yeah.
1, my own personal, but 2, just in general, there may be other people on the phone thinking, what do I do?
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. And I think that is, it's great to bring up because it's just, that's one of the first steps that we do with people when they're starting the process is you got to identify your team. Mm-hmm. Look at who the people are in your life, who help you make decisions, who are around you, who know you. If you don't feel like you have those people, let's figure out a way to get out there and meet some people and get to know people. Let's use some community access or whatever we need to do.
And that's why I do think support is talking about that now, because, your son is under guardianship. So creating that supported decision-making team now, because it's already really there, but these are conversations that team could have to put all those things in place.
Well, and I remember when we were first talking about, we've already talked about Dawn, but we were talking about, when we first started talking about her, we didn't feel like she had a team really at the beginning. Because her sisters were the ones that she was just fighting with. But she does, and she did, and now she has an even bigger one. But she was able to identify some people, and now that she's got like her family home provider is very much involved in her life, and like I said, very much a part of that family. And so she had some people, and then she's been able to grow that team as well since then. Just being able to get out and do things, working and living in a different environment and being involved in some different groups. She's been able to grow that group. So it's possible for sure.
I have a question from an online participant, Jennifer Albrecht. I've seen situations where families are vehemently against their family member being their own guardian. Things can get heated. How does protection advocacy handle this? How does the court usually respond? Jennifer says, I'm just asking out of a lack of experience.
Well, I think actually one of the cases that we worked on, I think that was kind of where we were. But I think education, P&A may not get involved. Every case is different. But I think our approach would be first to approach the family members who are against, and maybe even with, we might strategize with, if there are people on the team that are supportive, and they get along well with the team, then, or the family members, I might include them in that conversation. But I think, the first thing would be education in a non-adversarial way, which, because a lot of times it's just they lack the education and understanding of what we're talking about and what supported decision making is. They have fears, and if we can try to address those fears, I think we can do that and be successful.
Yeah, and I think thinking about why, asking for the other family members to identify why they think the person needs a guardian, and looking at that and seeing if there are other ways, like the practical tool does to address those needs. Because I've had family members call me, I think, a little bit confused about what I do and ask me about what the process is for getting their family member, getting guardianship for their family member. At which point I talk to them, ask them why they want guardianship. And more often than not, the reasons why they want to pursue guardianship are not things that are going to be solved by getting guardianship. I'm afraid that they're going to let the wrong person give them a ride home from someplace. Well, how is you being their guardian going to prevent that from happening?
And Jennifer, of course, I know you're way out in Paducah, but that's, if you worked with a particular group of families, and Laura and I are certainly happy to come to Paducah because that's part of this okay. Right, Laura?
Sure, yeah, let's go. We're willing, yes.
Because that's part of what we're trying to do, is to try to prevent and educate family members along with individuals with disabilities, and educate them so we don't have those fears. So the way that we do that is we are willing to go.
I love to travel.
We're willing to go to, if there's a group of family members or other interested parties, we'll come. And maybe we can have that discussion with them and see if we can address their fears.
Thank you. And maybe if you drive this far, you might as well just stay for a vacation since you drove this.
Sounds good.
Let's see the sights of Paducah.
Paducah's a nice city.
It is nice. Nothing wrong with Paducah.
I was just there.
We have another question from Bill Schilt online. I am guardian for a 94-year-old woman in northern Kentucky with moderate to advanced dementia. Part of the reason that I'm her guardian is that her family, Adult Protective Services didn't think that her 96-year-old husband or her 66-year-old son, who lacks the education and understanding to manage the various guardianship reports, could adequately manage her needs. I'm not opposed to, for example, her son being guardian, and my involvement being as a guardian, my involvement being as a case manager rather than a guardian. Are there any examples of support decision making being used to supplement a family's guardianship when the family member can't adequately serve on their own?
If I'm understanding the question right, the answer is yes. That yeah, you can definitely use support it, like because so from what I'm so maybe the guardian wouldn't be able to handle all of the aspects of the guardianship, the reporting requirements and such is maybe what I'm hearing. And I mean, well, and it does fall to the guardian to be ultimately responsible for that paperwork. But yeah, you can definitely use supported decision making.
So you're really supporting the guardian in their decision making.
Everybody needs a supported decision making team, so that's fine. But yeah, I think if the guardian shouldn't have to do everything alone. The guardian doesn't have to be like that ultimate power that we talked about, and that yeah, there can definitely be and we have cases where there's a team around a person who's supporting them, and the team may or may not include the guardian. So I think if I'm understanding right, the answer is yes.
It says, are there any examples of supported decision-making being used to supplement a family guardianship when the family member can't adequately serve on their own? Is the question.
I don't know of any examples, but I think it's really, I think it'd be interesting to explore that with the courts. I mean, so I think you should explore it. And if you want technical assistance from us, we're happy to talk to you. And because I think it's a little different than what it's a little different, but it's interesting. And I think it's possible that if you get the right judge, they'll, that might consider that.
That's the other thing about guardianship and modifying it or getting it is it's like you mentioned, it's very different from county to county. And a lot of times it just depends on what courtroom you end up in as to what the outcome is.
Sounds to me like, there at least probably people in this room have a consensus that guardianship is overused. Are there any estimates on how much that's costing the state, the overuse of guardianship?
The best we can come up with is just breaking down what the state is spending per award based on the resources that they're in. I'm sorry that I don't have that on me, but based on just because there's a lot of factors, and the Dale folks might want to weigh on this more, but so all the financial stuff, as I understand it, goes through Frankfurt so that the individual guardian isn't as directly involved in that. So there's a lot of factors involved there that make it really hard to determine really how much is going into it. But because we know that guardianship is needed for a lot of people, and we know that it's not working as well as it can be, one of the ways to help fix that is to get people who don't need it out of the system so that the system can focus on the people who really do need this help. So that, instead of 80 wards, somebody has 15 or 20 or however many, that they're really able to focus on meeting those people's needs. And so, yeah, I know we have asked before about the overall expenditure, and it's hard to nail down because of
certainly a non-zero number.
It's not zero.
It seems like that would be a compelling argument to make to a judge that does not want to restore someone's rights.
Well, and and even if you stop it from the on-ramp, if there are fewer petitions for guardianship, that's going to free up those dockets for other things and free up those resources as well.
And I think Judge Feely mentioned this earlier. One of the changes, I didn't have this in our slide specifically on that, but House Bill 5, one of the other changes was when a judge is making the determination on who is guardian, they consider the resources and the caseload of the various guardianship workers. So I think that is now in House Bill 5 where it wasn't before. I don't know what that outcome will mean, because if the person is disabled and there's no other party, but that they did try, I think House Bill is trying to address that somewhat.
Yeah, and we are in no means saying that the state guardians are bad guardians. It's just they're so overwhelmed with
a hard job.
It's hard to do a good job for everybody when there's that many people that you have to work with.
Go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. Judge Feely says, not enough in response to the
Yeah.
last question.
No,
It would not save enough money?
No,
You
we don't
just
have
to-
enough
I
money.
just got not enough. Not enough.
Yeah. I think I'm guessing that he's saying that there's not enough money. There aren't enough resources
That's what I think.
to properly
That's what I
serve
think he's saying.
everyone that we have.
That's what I think.
Speaking for
Oh, I was just gonna add to this line of thinking and ask for another number that I know you don't have with you. But I'm sure you can give me an approximation.
Sure.
Bigger or smaller, by how much of all the guardianships in Kentucky, how many are state guardianships?
I do have that number and I don't have it on me because we just recently started collecting that data. And that won't be so this is another problem is we don't really know how many guardians
We don't know how
there
many private.
are in Kentucky when you factor in the private guardians. They're
We know the public's 4,500,
right.
give or take.
And so it's hard to say, but from the information we collect from National Core Indicators, which will only be adults with developmental or intellectual disabilities who are receiving some sort of service, we do have that data and I'll get back to you. But that, just in the past year or two, we started collecting that data, specifically breaking down who the guardian is. Anything else? 12 minutes early. Well, there's some resources. We already did questions. There's the contact information. Bill Dolan will be happy to respond to all of your questions. You may email him or call him 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
And really, the best, if you have questions or additional questions about guardianship, and you want to ask P&A, the best way is just to call our 1-800 number because we do have limited staff and a lot of us are on the road. And so Bill may not, or I will not be available to address all those calls. So if you just call the 1-800 line and the staff will take an intake, they'll get your information and then we'll assign it to an attorney or an advocate within 2 to 3 working business days. So that's probably the best way if you have additional questions for P&A. Lori, just call her.
Just one more question. Maybe it's a Judge Feely question. Well, anyway, this issue that you raised, Camille, and actually Bill Dolan and I think raised it, or I raised it at one of the KGA conferences, is if the person wants to go to work and the guardian says no, why can the person not still go to work? Because that's not one of the rights that's taken away. The right to enter into a contract is taken away, which is what, that is a huge issue.
I guess it's personal decision making. I mean, I think that's when you go to district court and just
and see if you could get that click.
Yeah.
The judge could say,
yeah, specify that in the order or
And I think that's one of the ways in the guardianship is practiced in a much more restrictive manner than we've seen the statutes are written. It actually talks about vocational pursuits are supposed to encourage people to do that and support people to do that.
or I don't know what the best way. I think you could, you definitely would need to, Kevin, what do you think? File even a modification because
you're not going to modify
I know you wouldn't modify the order, but I'm trying to figure out how you get in there because if you, I mean, are you going to hire an attorney? So what would you advise on, not to put you on the spot, but I'm putting you on the spot. Or Bill Dolan, if you want to respond to that, how do we file in district court? What would be the proper process to have that go before district court judge to address employment and working or other type of issues?
So Carolyn, you know more about this than me. So, because I've heard this a lot, and it seems like from the legal standpoint, the guardian doesn't really have
that is my point of view.
the ability to say no.
The district court judge said that was correct. However, in real life, we know
Right.
that
Right.
happens a lot.
Right.
Is the guardian's argument not that it's a safety issue?
It depends.
Shouldn't be, but.
Or they're losing, or they're afraid they're gonna lose their benefits.
It can be any number of things, Bev. I mean,
And-
so maybe a safety, and legitimately, there could be fear, there could have been a bad experience, so there's often.
And I
a
guess
safety
the
issue.
offer and acceptance of a job would be considered a contract, correct? Yeah, so I guess that would be where the legal.
And it's supported decision-making the person may need. The person may be able to do the job, but they may need people around them to figure out, what's the transportation, how do I, and
Sure.
the guardian doesn't want to be bothered with that.
Right,
So,
yeah.
you know, so they can't just go to work
Yeah.
even though they've got the opportunity.
And I would think the legal argument on the part of the guardian would be that that is a contract when you have an offer and acceptance of employment.
Or a contract with both rehab, because when you make the.
Right.
Right.
You have to sign the form, so that may be.
Yeah, I mean, I just don't think that, you know, a district judge, and again, Feely may have input into this, but, you know, unless, you know, you're talking about civil and human rights, you know, the deprivation, and only to the extent, you know, if they're not endangering their health, safety, welfare, there could be some people, though, that could fall under if they are wanting to do certain employment, then there's health, safety, welfare. But I just think the cleanest, and if you're not able to make that reason with the guardian, private or public, then just, you know, going through that district court. Has Bill responded?
He has
Or
not.
Judge
but
Feely?
Bill can use his microphone.
Oh, Bill, you can use, well, we will unmic you.
Well, he can just start talking.
Google it.
He's too busy. So, yeah,
So-
I would think that would be where the
Car-
legal issue would come into.
Yeah, Carolyn, we will get you a specific answer.
Hello?
Well, I just,
There,
there
Hey,
you go.
Bill.
Hey, Bill.
I'm not eating a turkey sandwich. I don't know if y'all heard
That's
the beginning part of that, but at the
we did. Well,
beginning.
some of us did.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't mute my mic in the beginning and I was having lunch, but you know, I think that anytime you get to that point where you're stuck or you have that, because I always seek the district court. So I think someone had said earlier too, Camille, Laura, you know, the district court would be, I think that that's a good resource to when you're really stuck and there's friction as to what to do next. That's probably hopefully you can try and resolve that prior to doing that. But I think ultimately the district court's going to oversee the appointment, and they could provide some guidance on that issue.
So, Bill, what Carolyn's question is, how would you get that before the judge in district court? What would you have a private attorney file some type of a motion, or could you, as a citizen, what form, what would you do to initiate?
And I would defer to, like I said, you know, Judge Feely or anybody who's had more practice in it, but the statute says that any interested person can file a petition for relief. So probably within that petition, you could just ask then for clarification of an order.
Yeah, that's what I was.
So that's helpful, Bill. This is Carolyn Wheeler again, because I get a lot of case managers asking me this. So I'd like,
Yeah, I'll
go through the statute, but I'd like them to know that there would be then another mechanism if they're willing to do
Yeah.
that. You know,
Yeah, I wouldn't do it at first, but if you really got to the point where there was an impasse, that you could seek that. But I'll quickly Google the actual statutory language, and I'll paste it up here in a second.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Bill.
Bill.
Thank you.
Can you hear
And
me?
one thing that we didn't really talk about is, I think Camille alluded to it, but there is a WINGS group that has been assembled in Kentucky. WINGS stands for Working Interdisciplinary Network of Guardianship Stakeholders. And Camille and I are both a part of that, as along with many other, some judges, some attorneys, other people. And that's looking at the laws and practice around guardianship in Kentucky, and trying to improve it and make the system generally work better. So that's still in the early stages, but we are trying to work on that, just so everybody knows.
And a big piece of that is education. And that's, in fact, Laura and I serve on a subcommittee on education, and which includes alternatives to guardianship as well, not just guardianship in general, but maybe even the statutory language, you know, educating people on the process as well, and the role of guardianship, because I do think there's a lot of miseducation out there.
So, and also there's a legislative and policy committee that's also working on looking at some of the language that might need to be cleaned up, like the guardian ad litem issue and things like that. So, anything else? No? All right. Well, thank you all.
I'll stop after this, but you know that bench, there's a bench change that the Kentucky Guardianship Association did about House Bill 5.
Right.
To me, it would be great if you all had a bench, whatever they're called.
Bench card is what they're calling it.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
About supporting decision making.
Right, if we could get, I mean, yeah, and we really, of course, Dale, when I first, actually, I think it's going to be a helpful tool if judges choose to use it. I think it's going to go back to the over appointments, I commend
one.
Dale for coming out with that, because I think it's good. Hopefully they'll use it and reference it when they're appointing Dale as the guardian. At some point they looked at putting alternatives on there as well. I'm not sure,
That's not on the final draft.
but
They did have it. It was originally front and back, and they redrafted it, and it's mainly just about the
The
changes for the.
but certainly that's something the Wings group is their education piece that we're looking at, and we can certainly propose, but we'll need help getting it to, because they have the judicial college, I think, annually, and figuring out a way to get it into those judges' hands is going to be the most important piece. Yeah.
And we do have sitting judges in that
Right.
group who are involved in that. And
Judge Feely says district court retains jurisdiction and can be petitioned for any needed changes.
Right.
Attorney is not required, but each clerk has their own practice points.
so again, going back to, it's different in every county. So you can petition your court, but the way the clerk deals with it might be different in each county. All right. Nothing else? Anything else? All right. Well, thanks, everybody. Let us know if you have questions or need anything.